On February 28, 1981, 7 people were found dead in New Orleans. The method, methodical poisoning laced with slow-acting toxins. The perpetrators, 2 sisters, Celeste and Marie Laveau, determined to avenge the death of their younger brother, Raymond. Law enforcement would later call it one of the most calculated series of deaths in the city's history. But the reason wasn't greed, wasn't a drug deal gone wrong, wasn't even a fight over territory. It was justice. An eye for an eye. Revenge for a brother lost to a brutal system. If you have the courage to hear this story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. But I warn you, this narrative contains shocking events. New Orleans, 1981. Population, 557,515. The city sprawled across 169.5 square miles of swampland and delta, humidity clinging to everything like a second skin. The Treme neighborhood, just north of the French Quarter, was a place where survival had become more calculation than culture. This area, rich in African American heritage and Creole tradition, had witnessed the systematic collapse of manufacturing jobs and the arrival of something darker: crack cocaine, flooding the streets with a violence the city had never seen. At the height of the epidemic, the city's resources were stretched beyond breaking. Communities like Treme were left to fend for themselves. The summer heat in 1981 was oppressive. Temperatures climbed to 94 degrees by noon, dropped to 78 at night, but the humidity never relented. The air smelled of decay, rotting garbage piled on corners, backed up sewage from ancient pipes, and something sweeter, sickly, crack smoke. It drifted from abandoned shotgun houses, mixed with exhaust fumes from cars that barely ran, mingled with the sour tang of bodies that had sweated through their clothes 3 times before sunset. At night, humidity smothered the neighborhood like a wet blanket. The sounds changed then. Distant sirens, the hum of window air conditioners laboring in the few homes that could afford electricity, late-night chatter from corner dealers, occasional gunshots, sharp and clear, car alarms shrieking until their batteries died, someone always screaming somewhere, someone always crying. The local economy had collapsed. The port of New Orleans, which had employed thousands, had automated. Longshoremen jobs disappeared. The shipyards closed. Manufacturing plants relocated to suburbs or foreign countries. Unemployment in Treme reached 38% by 1980. For young black men, it was closer to 52%. The jobs that remained paid minimum wage, $3.35 an hour. A man could work 40 hours a week and still not feed his family. The mathematics were simple and brutal. A rock of crack sold for $5. A dealer could make $300 in a night. The promise of a better future had become a cruel joke told by people who didn't live there, didn't understand what it meant to watch your children go hungry while you worked 2 jobs that paid nothing. The New Orleans Police Department, underfunded and undermanned, had effectively abandoned Treme. The 6th District Station, responsible for the neighborhood, had 47 officers for 45,000 residents. Response times averaged 43 minutes. Some calls went unanswered entirely. The officers who did respond were often corrupt, on the take, or simply exhausted. Internal affairs investigations revealed that 16% of NOPD officers had criminal records themselves. The institutions meant to protect had become predators or ghosts. In Treme, you handled your own problems. The law was an abstraction that applied to other people and other neighborhoods. Here, different rules governed survival. In a place where honor was tied directly to respect, where a man's word was the only currency he truly possessed, A slight against family could mean the end of everything. The concept of revenge wasn't pathology. It was culture, passed down through generations that had learned not to trust systems that were built to exclude them. To let a wrong go unpunished was to admit weakness, and weakness in Treme was a death sentence. You protected your own. You avenged your own. If someone took from you, you took from them. The code was simple, ancient, and absolute. It superseded written law because written law had never protected people like the Laveaux. In such a world, where respect was survival and justice had abandoned its people, the path Celeste and Marie Laveaux would walk seemed almost inevitable. Celeste Marie Laveaux, 34 years old, stood 5'6", her body lean and hardened from years of physical labor. She had worked since she was 12. It showed in her hands, calloused and scarred, and in the way she carried herself, shoulders slightly hunched as if perpetually braced against a blow. Her hair was long and dark, usually pulled into a tight braid that hung between her shoulder blades. She wore the scars of a hard life, a small burn mark on her right hand, puckered and white from when she'd grabbed a pan handle on the stove at age 7. Her mother had been high. Celeste had been making dinner for her younger siblings. She'd never forgotten the lesson. No one was coming to take care of them. They had to take care of each other. Celeste woke every morning at 5 a.m., before the sun had a chance to turn the city into an oven. Her first action was always the same. She reached for the pack of cool cigarettes on the nightstand, shook one loose, lit it with a plastic Bic lighter. She took slow drags, letting the menthol fill her lungs, exhaling through her nose. She sat on the edge of the bed in the shotgun house she shared with Marie and Raymond, feet on the scarred wooden floor, and she thought about what they'd lost. Their mother, dead at 38 from an overdose. Their father, gone before Celeste could remember his face. Their grandmother, the last steady presence, dead 3 years ago from diabetes. And now, Raymond, always Raymond. His face in the morning quiet, his laugh, the way he'd called her Selly when he was small. She brewed coffee in a chipped mug that had belonged to their grandmother, Folgers, the red canister. The smell filled the small kitchen. The kettle whistled, a sound that grounded her, made her feel like maybe the world still had order. She sat at the kitchen table, the same table where their grandmother had taught them to play cards, taught them about the old ways, about gris-gris and protection, and what it meant to be a Laveaux in New Orleans. Celeste sat alone in the pre-dawn darkness and contemplated what Raymond had lost. 16 years. That's all he got. 16 years in a world that chewed up boys like him and spit them out. Celeste worked as a cashier at Martin's Corner Store on North Claiborne Avenue. Minimum wage, $3.35 an hour. She'd been there for 6 years. The owner, Mr. Martin, was a Korean immigrant who treated her fairly, paid her on time, didn't touch her like the last boss had. She worked the register, stocked shelves, mopped floors, took inventory. She knew every regular by name, knew what they bought, knew who was struggling and who was dealing. She had worked the 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. shift for 4 years straight. Before Martin's, she'd waitressed at a diner on Rampart Street. Before that, she'd cleaned houses in the Garden District, white women's homes that cost more than Celeste would make in 3 lifetimes. Celeste had no children of her own. She'd raised Raymond and Marie instead. Raymond had been 3 when their mother died. Celeste had been 17. She'd dropped out of high school, gotten the job at the diner, kept the family together because the alternative was foster care, and she'd heard the stories. She knew what happened to pretty girls and young boys in the system. She'd kept them together, fed them, clothed them, made sure Raymond went to school, even when he didn't want to, even when the other kids made fun of his clothes. She'd been his mother in every way that mattered. Marie, 31, was quieter than Celeste, more calculating. Where Celeste felt everything intensely, Marie processed the world through cold logic. She worked nights at Charity Hospital, cleaning rooms, emptying bedpans, mopping floors slick with blood, and worse. She saw death regularly. It didn't frighten her anymore. The sisters were bonded by shared hardship, by losses that had carved them hollow and filled them back up with something harder than grief. Marie rarely spoke, unless she had something important to say. When she did speak, Celeste listened. Raymond had been everything soft and hopeful that remained in their family. He'd been a good kid, sweet. He'd loved basketball, played at the court on Henrietta de Lille Street until the streetlights came on. He'd talked about maybe going to college, maybe studying engineering. He'd been smart, brought home B's and C's despite everything. He'd tried to stay away from the corners, from the dealers. But the neighborhood was small, and the dealers were everywhere. And Raymond had been curious, had been hurting, in ways he couldn't articulate. He'd tried heroin exactly once. Raymond Laveau died on February 12, 1981. He was 16 years old. The heroin he'd bought from a dealer named Gino Corolla had been laced with battery acid, a practice some dealers used to stretch their product, to create a caustic rush that desperate users mistook for purity. Raymond had injected it in the bathroom of the shotgun house, while Celeste was at work and Marie was at the hospital. He'd died on the cracked linoleum floor, alone, vomiting blood, his internal organs dissolving. The neighbor, Mrs. Aucoin, had found him when she came to borrow sugar. She'd screamed so loud the entire block heard. Celeste had been at work when the call came. Mr. Martin had driven her home himself, his face gray with shared grief. She'd walked into the house and seen the blood, seen the shape under the sheet the paramedics had draped, and something inside her had died too. She'd stood there not crying, not speaking, just looking. Marie had come home an hour later. The sisters had sat together on the sagging couch, and Marie had held Celeste's hand, and neither of them had said anything because there was nothing to say. Raymond was gone. They'd buried him 4 days later, February 16th, at St. Louis Cemetery No. 2. The service was small. Neighbors came, people who'd known their grandmother. Father Michaels from St. Augustine Church said the words. Celeste and Marie stood beside the above-ground tomb in their only black dresses, sweating in the February humidity, and watched them seal their baby brother away. What Celeste valued most wasn't money or power or the things she saw white people on television worry about. What she valued was family, the protection of blood, the idea that you stood for your own no matter what. This value had been instilled in her by her grandmother, Eulalie Laveau, a woman who had lived through Jim Crow and poverty and the death of 3 of her own children. Eulalie had believed that family was sacred, that blood debts had to be paid, that you never, ever let anyone disrespect your kin and walk away. She'd taught Celeste the old ways, the Creole traditions, the idea that some wrongs couldn't be forgiven. The night of Raymond's funeral, February 16th, Celeste had been standing outside the house, smoking, trying to breathe. A car had rolled past, music thumping, laughter. She'd looked up and seen them. 5 dealers from the corner of North Robertson and St. Philip. She'd recognized them all. Gino Corolla driving, Jerome Little in the passenger seat, Marcus and David Vincent, brothers, in the back, and Leon Thibodeau hanging out the window. They'd slowed as they passed. Leon had looked right at her in her funeral dress. "Sorry about your brother." He'd laughed. Then Jerome had laughed. The car had rolled away. 5 men laughing at a sister in mourning. 17 neighbors had been outside. 17 people watched the car roll past. 17 people heard the laughter. 17 people saw Celeste's face as she understood that Raymond's death meant nothing to the men who'd killed him. He'd been a customer. One overdose among hundreds. Collateral damage in an economy of poison. Celeste had dropped the cigarette, walked inside, sat at the kitchen table. Marie had come in, still in her funeral dress, and sat across from her. "You saw?" "I saw." "You heard them?" "I heard." They'd sat in silence. The house smelled like the flowers from the funeral, lilies and roses wilting in the heat. Celeste had tried the legal route because she'd promised their grandmother she'd always tried to do things right. 2 days after the funeral, she'd walked into the 6th District Police Station on Felicity Street. The building was old, institutional green paint peeling, fluorescent lights flickering. She'd waited an hour to speak to a detective. Detective Ray Blount, 46, overweight, exhausted. "I need to report a death." "We already got the report, Ms. Laveau. Medical examiner ruled it accidental overdose." "It wasn't accidental. The heroin was poisoned, cut with battery acid. That's how heroin is sometimes. They killed him." "Who's they?" "Gino Corolla, Jerome Little, the dealers on North Robertson." Blount had sighed. He'd leaned back in his chair. The overhead fan had squeaked with each rotation. "Ms. Laveau, I'm sorry for your loss, truly, but your brother bought drugs. He used them. That's a choice he made. He was 16, old enough to know better. You're not going to do anything. There's nothing to do. We can't prove Corolla knew the heroin was contaminated. We can't prove intent. It's a tragedy, but it's not prosecutable. So he just gets away with it." "I didn't say that. I said it's not prosecutable." Blount had looked at her, and she'd seen it in his eyes. He knew what would happen next. He'd seen it before. He was telling her in the way cops told people in neighborhoods like Treme, that the law wouldn't help, but he understood if she found another way. Celeste had stood, walked out. The humidity had hit her like a wall. She'd walked the 12 blocks home, past boarded-up buildings and corner dealers and playing children, and she'd known with absolute certainty that Raymond's death would not go unanswered. The kitchen table decision came on March 3, 1981. It was 9 p.m. The house was hot, the window air conditioner broken, the smell of boiling rice and red beans lingering from dinner. Celeste sat at the kitchen table. Marie sat across from her. The overhead light, a bare bulb, cast harsh shadows. A candle burned in the center of the table, one of their grandmother's old glass prayer candles, with the Virgin Mary on the side. The wax pooled, dripped. "We can't let this stand." Marie said nothing, just watched her sister. "Raymond is dead because of them, because Gino Corolla sold poison and didn't care who died, because Jerome and Marcus and David and Leon were there, part of the same operation, the same supply chain. They all profited from his death. What are you saying? I'm saying we handle this ourselves. Celeste, you heard what Blount said. The police won't do anything. They don't care about dead black boys from Treme. They never have. There's got to be another way. What way? We hire a lawyer? With what money? We file a civil suit? Against who? Dealers don't have assets. We wait for God to sort it out. Marie's jaw tightened. How many? All of them. Everyone involved. That's 7 people. 7 people killed our brother. If we do this, there's no coming back. I know. The sisters sat in silence. The candle flickered. Outside, someone's car stereo thumped bass. A dog barked. The city breathed its hot, tired breath. Marie reached across the table, took Celeste's hand. Then we do it right. We do it careful. We make sure they understand why. They'll understand. What Celeste didn't know, sitting at that table with her sister, making a promise to their dead brother, was that her decision would set in motion a chain of events that would leave 7 people dead and both sisters in prison for the rest of their lives. That the justice she sought would destroy what remained of her family. That the gris-gris bag she would place on each body, the token meant to honor Raymond, would become the evidence that convicted them both. The preparation phase lasted 3 weeks. Celeste and Marie planned with the methodical care of women who had spent their lives solving problems without resources. They had no money for guns, no connections to career criminals. What they had was patience, intelligence, and a deep understanding of the neighborhood they'd lived in their entire lives. Celeste bought a small notebook at the drugstore, blue, spiral-bound. She documented everything. Gino Carolla lived in a rented house on North Prieur Street. He left for the corner at 3 miles p.m. every day. Returned home at 2 calls a.m. He drove a brown Oldsmobile Cutlass, license plate TJR 442. Jerome Little lived with his mother on Dumaine Street. He worked mornings at a tire shop on Claiborne, dealt afternoons and evenings. The Vincent brothers, Marcus and David, lived together in an apartment on St. Philip. Leon Thibodeau stayed with his girlfriend, Shanice, in a shotgun house near the Interstate 10 overpass. Marie worked at the hospital. She had access to the pharmacy. Over the course of 2 weeks, she stole small amounts of potassium chloride and digoxin, cardiac medications that in sufficient doses would cause heart failure. 15 milliliters of potassium chloride, injected, would stop a heart in minutes. Combined with digoxin to slow the heart rate first, it mimicked natural cardiac arrest. Marie was careful. She took only a little from each shift, only from bottles that were being discarded, only when the pharmacy tech was distracted. She brought the stolen medications home in her purse, stored them in a locked box under her bed. But they decided against injection. Too complex, too easy to fight back. Instead, Marie researched poisons that could be ingested, that acted slowly enough that the victim wouldn't connect their symptoms to the source. She found what she needed in the hospital's toxicology reference books. Thallium sulfate, a rat poison, tasteless, odorless. It caused nausea, vomiting, eventually cardiac failure, and death over the course of days. Victims would think they had the flu. By the time they sought medical help, it would be too late. Thallium sulfate wasn't easy to acquire. It had been banned for residential use in 1972, but industrial suppliers still sold it. Marie called a pest control company in Métairie, claimed she had a severe rat infestation in a warehouse she managed. The supplier required a business license. Marie created a fake one using letterhead she'd stolen from the hospital administration office. She picked up 2 pounds of thallium sulfate on March 18th, paid in cash $47.50. The man who sold it to her didn't ask questions. Celeste and Marie prepared the poison in their kitchen. They mixed thallium sulfate with sugar, creating a compound that dissolved easily in liquid. They portioned it into small vials, each containing enough to deliver a lethal dose. They made 7 vials, 1 for each target. The sisters also prepared the gris-gris bags their grandmother had taught them to make. Small leather pouches sewn from scraps. Inside each they placed roots, herbs, graveyard dirt from their grandmother's tomb, and a photograph of Raymond, his school picture from sophomore year. He was smiling. The gris-gris bags were both protection and declaration. They would mark each death as connected to Raymond, as justice rendered in the old way. On March 20th, Celeste went to Martin's corner store for her shift. Mr. Martin was restocking cigarettes behind the counter. "You doing okay, Celeste?" "Managing. You seem tired." "Everybody's tired." She worked her shift, rang up customers, bagged groceries. At 6 p.m., a regular came in, Mr. Davis, an old man who bought a pack of Salems and a scratch-off lottery ticket every evening. "How you holding up, baby?" "I'm fine, Mr. Davis." "That boy of yours, Raymond, that was a shame." "Yes, sir. You let me know if you need anything." "I will." But she wouldn't. She didn't need anything from anyone. She and Marie would handle this themselves. That evening, Marie came home from her shift at the hospital. She found Celeste at the kitchen table, the 7 vials lined up in front of her like soldiers. "You ready?" "Yes." Their grandmother's oldest friend, Miss Opal, lived 3 houses down. She was 78, had known the Laveau family for 50 years. 2 days before they began, she came to the house. Celeste was on the porch. Miss Opal climbed the steps slowly, her knees bad, her breathing labored. "Child?" "Miss Opal, I know that look." "What look?" "The look your grandmother had before she did something that couldn't be undone." Celeste said nothing. "Whatever you're thinking, stop. You hear me? Let the Lord handle it." "The Lord's been handling it. Raymond's still dead. Baby, if you cross this line, you can't come back. You understand? Some things can't be forgiven. Some things shouldn't be." Miss Opal looked at her, shook her head. There were tears in the old woman's eyes. "Then God help you." She left. Celeste watched her walk down the street, each step slow and pained, and felt nothing. The sisters began on March 23, 1981, 6:15 p.m., Monday, temperature 71 degrees, overcast. The humidity was thick, the smell of rain coming. Celeste walked to the corner of North Robertson and St. Philip, where the dealers gathered. She wore jeans and a plain t-shirt. In her purse, she carried 1 vial of poisoned sugar and a small gris-gris bag. Her heart beat steady. Her hands were dry. Léon Thibodeau was 26 years old. He was leaning against the wall outside the shuttered laundromat, drinking a Coke from a glass bottle. He saw Celeste approach. He smiled. Well, Miss Celeste, you come to apologize for giving me the cold shoulder?" "I came to talk." "About what?" "Raymond." Leon's smile faded slightly. "That's done, baby. No point dwelling." "I'm not dwelling. I just want to understand what happened." "He bought bad dope. Happens. From Gino." "I don't know about all that." "You were there. You and Jerome and the Vincent brothers." Leon pushed off the wall, set the Coke bottle down on the window ledge. Look, I'm sorry he's dead. Truly. But that ain't on me. I'm not saying it is. I just need to understand. Leon looked at her, calculating. Decided she was harmless, just a grieving sister looking for closure. What you want to know? Was he scared at the end? I wasn't there when it happened. But you saw him that day, when he bought it. Yeah, he seemed fine. Just another transaction. Celeste nodded, reached into her purse, pulled out a small plastic bag with white powder inside. Leon's eyes widened. What's that? Sugar. I thought maybe you'd like some. For your Coke. I'm good. Please. I just need to feel like I can give something, anything, even something small. Leon hesitated, then shrugged, took the bag, poured it into his Coke, stirred it with his finger, took a drink. Thanks. You're welcome. Celeste left. Leon Thibodeau finished his Coke, went back to his corner, sold rocks until midnight. He went home to Shanice's place, climbed into bed, felt fine. Within 18 hours, he would begin vomiting. Within 48 hours, his hair would start falling out. Within 72 hours, he would be dead. 7:02 p.m. Celeste walked to Dumaine Street. The neighborhood was quiet, families eating dinner, the smell of cooking rice and sausage drifting from open windows. She found Jerome Little on his front porch, sitting in a plastic lawn chair, listening to the radio. The Saints were playing the Falcons. Jerome was drinking a Barks root beer. Jerome Little was 28 years old. He had a job interview scheduled for the following Monday at the lumber mill on South Claiborne. He'd already ironed his shirt. It hung on the back of his bedroom door. He'd been trying to get out of dealing, trying to go legitimate. The interview was his best chance in years. Jerome. He turned, saw Celeste. His expression shifted, uncertain. Celeste. Hey, can I talk to you? About what? Raymond. Jerome set the root beer down, stood. I didn't have nothing to do with that. I know. I just need to ask you something. What? Do you remember him? From that day? I remember. What was he like? He was nervous. Kids always nervous their first time. Did he say anything? He asked if the stuff was clean. I told him it was. I thought it was. You didn't know about the battery acid. No, that was Gino's supply. Gino cuts his own product. I just sell it. Celeste nodded. She pulled a thermos from her bag. I made coffee. Too much. You want some? I'm good. Please. I know it's strange, but I just need to do something kind today. For someone. Anyone. Jerome hesitated, looked at her face. Saw the grief there. Decided she was just a sad woman looking for connection. Sure. Okay. She poured coffee into the thermos cap, handed it to him. He drank. It was sweet. She'd added sugar. He finished it, handed the cap back. Thank you. You're welcome. Celeste left. Jerome Little went inside, watched the rest of the game, went to bed. The ironed shirt hung on the door, ready. He would never wear it. 8:30 p.m. The Vincent brothers, Marcus and David, lived in a second-floor apartment on St. Philip Street. Celeste climbed the exterior stairs, knocked on the door. Marcus answered. He was 31, tall, lean, a scar across his left eyebrow from a fight when he was 17. Marcus Vincent was engaged. His fiancée, Tamara, was 3 months pregnant. They were planning to get married in June at St. Augustine Church. Tamara had already picked out her dress. Marcus had been saving money, dealing to build a nest egg so he could open a barbershop. He had the location picked out, had talked to the landlord. He was 2 months away from making it happen. Celeste? Marcus, I need to talk to you and David. We ain't got nothing to say. Please. David appeared behind Marcus. He was 29, shorter, stockier, more cautious. Let her in. They sat in the small living room. A TV played in the corner, the volume low. The apartment smelled like fried chicken. What you want? Marcus asked. I want to know why. Why what? Why Raymond had to die. He didn't have to. It just happened. Because Gino sold poison. Gino's supply is Gino's business. You both work for him. We work with him. That's different. Celeste reached into her bag, pulled out a bottle of Coca-Cola. I brought this as an offering. I don't know how else to say I'm not here for trouble. David took the bottle, opened it with a church key on his keychain, took a drink, passed it to Marcus. Marcus drank. They finished it between them. Celeste left. Within a day, both brothers would begin showing symptoms. While Celeste walked from the Vincent brothers' apartment back to her home, 3 miles away, Margaret Simpson was putting her daughter to bed. Margaret was a nurse at Charity Hospital, worked the same shifts as Marie. She had no idea that her co-worker's sister was systematically poisoning 7 men. She tucked her daughter in, kissed her forehead, turned off the light. She had no idea that in 4 days she would be treating Leon Thibodeau in the emergency room, watching him die despite everything she tried. 9:47 p.m. Celeste found Gino Carolla at the Hideaway Lounge on North Claiborne, a dive bar where dealers went to unwind. He was sitting at the bar, drinking Jack Daniels, talking to a woman in a red dress. Gino Rat Carolla was 38 years old, short, wiry, a face aged by hard living. He had 3 children by 2 different women. He sent them money irregularly, saw them rarely. He'd been dealing since he was 19. It was the only life he knew. Celeste sat down next to him. The bartender, an older man named Roy, looked at her. You drinking? Coke. Roy poured, slid the glass across the bar. Celeste turned to Gino. We need to talk. Gino looked at her. Recognition dawned. You're the sister. That's right. I'm sorry about the kid. Are you? Yeah, I am. I didn't know the dope was bad. You cut it yourself. I cut it with lactose sometimes. Baking soda, not battery acid. That was a bad batch from my supplier. I didn't know until after. And you kept selling it? I threw the rest out. After Raymond died. Yeah. So his death saved other lives. Gino's expression hardened. What do you want? I want you to understand something. Raymond was 16. He was smart. He was going to do something with his life. And you took that away. He took that away when he stuck a needle in his arm. You gave him the needle. I gave him a product. He made a choice. Celeste reached into her purse, pulled out a small flask, poured whiskey into Gino's glass. He didn't notice. He was looking at the woman in the red dress. We done here? Gino asked. We're done. Celeste left. Gino finished his drink, bought another round, went home at 2 a.m., collapsed into bed. Within 36 hours, he would be in the emergency room. Over the next 3 days, Celeste found the remaining targets. She was methodical, patient. She never rushed. Each interaction was brief, forgettable. An offer of coffee, a bottle of soda, a flask of whiskey. No one suspected. No one connected the encounters to the sickness that would follow. March 26th, 4 p.m. Leon Thibodeau began vomiting. He thought he had the flu. Shanice made him soup. By 9 p.m., he was vomiting blood. Shanice called an ambulance. They took him to Charity Hospital. The doctors ran tests, couldn't determine the cause. Leon's hair began falling out. His organs were failing. On March 28th, at 3:17 a.m., Leon Thibodeau died. The medical examiner listed cause of death as acute gastroenteritis, possible food poisoning. March 27th, Jerome Little woke up feeling nauseous. He called in sick to the tire shop. By evening, he was too weak to stand. His mother found him on the bathroom floor. She called 911. The ambulance came. Jerome died en route to the hospital. He was 28 years old. The job interview was scheduled for the next morning. The ironed shirt still hung on the door. March 28th. Marcus Vincent began experiencing chest pains. He thought it was heartburn. Tamara made him Pepto-Bismol. By midnight, he was convulsing. Tamara called 911. Marcus died in the ambulance. David Vincent, showing the same symptoms, was hospitalized. He died March 29th. The wedding was scheduled for June 12th. Tamara wore black to the funeral, instead of white. While Marcus and David Vincent were dying in Charity Hospital, 4 blocks away, a man named Thomas Reed was celebrating his daughter's 8th birthday at Chuck E. Cheese. He had no connection to the Laveaus, to Treme, to any of this. He was laughing, watching his daughter play skee-ball, completely unaware that 2 men were dying, and that the system he trusted to protect him had already failed. March 30th. Gino Carolla woke up unable to move his legs. The thallium had attacked his nervous system. His girlfriend called 911. Gino was admitted to Charity. The doctors, now seeing a pattern, ran toxicology screens. They found traces of thallium sulfate. Gino died on April 1st, 1981. He was 38 years old. The remaining 2 victims, Curtis Melanson and Andre Baptiste, dealers who had been present when Raymond bought the fatal dose, died April 2nd and April 3rd. Both had accepted drinks from Celeste. Both showed the same symptoms. Both died in the hospital, their families surrounding them, no one understanding why. At each death, hospital staff found a small leather pouch on the victim's person or near their bedside. Inside, herbs, roots, dirt, and a photograph of a smiling teenage boy. The gris-gris bags were identical. 7 victims, 7 bags, 7 photographs of Raymond Laveau. On April 4th, 1981, New Orleans police detective Ray Blount stood in the 6th District Station, looking at 7 case files spread across his desk. 7 deaths in 11 days. All victims were dealers from the same neighborhood. All showed signs of thallium poisoning. All had been found with identical gris-gris bags containing Raymond Laveau's photograph. Blount remembered the woman who had come to him in February, Celeste Laveau. He'd told her the law couldn't help. He'd seen in her eyes what would happen next. He picked up the phone, called for a warrant. April 5th, 6 p.m. 12 NOPD officers surrounded the shotgun house on North Villers Street. Celeste and Marie were inside, asleep. The officers knocked. Celeste answered. She was wearing a nightgown, her long hair loose. She looked at the officers and understood immediately. "Celeste Laveau, you're under arrest for 7 counts of first-degree murder." She said nothing. Marie appeared behind her. The officers cuffed both sisters. They were taken to Orléans Parish Prison. In the house, officers found the remaining vials of poisoned sugar, the notebook documenting the victims' routines, the stolen medications from the hospital. They found the box of gris-gris bags Celeste had prepared. 7 had been used. 3 remained. The trial began October 12th, 1981. The prosecutions presented overwhelming evidence: the stolen thallium sulfate, the documented surveillance, the gris-gris bags with Raymond's photograph. Witnesses who had seen Celeste speaking to the victims hours before they became ill. The defense argued that Celeste and Marie had been driven to desperation by a system that had failed them, that they had sought justice when the law refused to act. The jury deliberated 4 hours. They returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. Celeste Laveau was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. Marie Laveau received the same. They were sent to the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women in St. Gabriel, 65 miles north of New Orleans. They were placed in separate cell blocks. They rarely saw each other. The families of the 7 victims held funerals throughout April. Léon Thibodeau was buried at Mount Olivet Cemetery. Shanice, his girlfriend, was 4 months pregnant when he died. She had the baby in August. A girl raised her alone. Jerome Little's mother, Dorothy, attended her son's funeral in a wheelchair, too broken by grief to stand. The ironed shirt was buried with him. Marcus and David Vincent were buried side by side. Tamara gave birth to Marcus's daughter in September, named her Grace, raised her with photographs of a father she would never know. Gino Carolla's children attended his funeral. His oldest daughter, 15, stood by the grave and cried. She didn't understand what her father had done, only that he was gone. The other victims, Curtis Melanson and André Baptiste, left behind parents, siblings, children. Each death created a widening circle of grief that touched dozens of lives. The gris-gris bags, the small leather pouches Celeste and Marie had prepared with such care, were entered into evidence. They sat in the Orleans Parish Criminal Court evidence room for 3 years during appeals. In 1984, when the appeals were exhausted, they were transferred to a storage facility. They remain there now in a box labeled State Vessel Laveau, 1981, gathering dust. The photographs of Raymond inside have faded. The herbs have dried to powder. The thing the sisters killed to avenge has been reduced to forgotten evidence in a forgotten case. Raymond Laveau's grave at St. Louis Cemetery No. 2 is visited once a year by Miss Opal, now 93, who places flowers and says a prayer. No one else comes. Celeste and Marie are still alive, still imprisoned. Celeste is 69. Marie is 66. They have served 43 years. They will die in prison. Was Celeste Laveau a murderer? Yes. She eliminated 7 people with premeditation and calculation. Léon Thibodeau, 26, who was going to be a father. Jerome Little, 28, who had a job interview that would have changed his life. Marcus Vincent, 31, engaged to be married 2 months from opening his own business. Was she also a woman abandoned by every institution, meant to protect her, defending the only thing she had left in a world that had taken everything else? Also, yes, the uncomfortable truth is that both things can be true simultaneously. Celeste and Marie were products of a broken system that offered no legitimate paths to justice, no protection for the vulnerable, no accountability for those who profited from death. They operated under a code that had sustained their family for generations, a code that said family was sacred and blood debts had to be paid. That code, in a world with functioning institutions, would have been tempered by law. But in Treme in 1981, the law was an abstraction. The code was all that remained. The sisters killed 7 people. Those 7 people also participated, directly or peripherally, in the death of a 16-year-old boy. None of this justifies what Celeste and Marie did. but it explains it. An explanation, even without justification, reveals something about the world that produced them. The violence solved nothing. Raymond stayed dead. 7 more people died. 2 families were destroyed. The poison that killed Raymond continued to flow through Treme, through New Orleans, through cities across America. The crack epidemic that was just beginning in 1981 would claim tens of thousands of lives over the next decade. The institutional failures that drove the Laveau sisters to murder would persist, would deepen, would create new tragedies in new neighborhoods with new names. In 2024, Celeste Laveau sits in a cell at the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women. Her hair is white now, her hands gnarled with arthritis. She has been imprisoned for 43 years. She rarely speaks. When asked if she regrets what she did, she says nothing. The gris-gris bag she placed on Gino Carolla's body, the last one she made, sits in a storage box 65 miles away. Inside is a photograph of Raymond, smiling, 16 years old, frozen in a moment before everything ended. The small leather pouch, meant as protection and justice and love, became the evidence that condemned her. The thing she killed to avenge is a faded photograph in a forgotten box. And Raymond Laveau, the boy whose death set everything in motion, remains in his tomb in St. Louis Cemetery No. 2, visited by no one but a 93-year-old woman who remembers when the Laveau sisters were just girls trying to survive in a world that had already decided they didn't matter.